What's up, everybody? Hope all of you are having a great time, whatever you're doing today or evening, whenever you're listening or watching the podcast, Bleav in Hub of Champions with the host, Strictly Writes. Today is I'm having someone that it's not a stranger. Many of you who have followed the Strictly Writes podcast from the beginning may remember this guest, Danny Vietti. He was last on the podcast, on my personal podcast, 3 years ago at the height of the pandemic. As we were talking about prior to the start of the recording, it feels like it's been 15 years. He's up to some amazing things now. Does great work with CBS Sports, and as well as the host of the Wake and Rake podcast as well. Check it out also on Bleav. Danny, what's going on, man? How are you doing this baseball season and in life in general these days?
Yeah, I was just telling you before we jumped on air, I needed to get a fresh cut today because there's gray hair on the sides. The last time we talked, I don't think I had gray hair on the sides of my head. Now I need to get a haircut every 2 weeks. Gray
Wow.
starts to get showing. So, one, I appreciate you having me back on the pod. Two,
Yeah.
we've aged a bit since we
Yeah,
last.
yeah. I didn't have gray in my beard at all. I mean, I'm blaming the pandemic and life post pandemic. That's given us a few grays. I mean, you could have had a little salt and pepper, but in this case, we kind of like ginger and pepper, sort of, in a way.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know what's funny? My wife my wife's really into juicing right now, so she made this new juice today with ginger. I didn't realize how spicy that ginger.
Oh yeah,
because I've had it with my sushi before, but like very lightly. But that hits you. That hits you. Really, it gets you out of nowhere. We're getting crazy on this episode.
Seriously, listen. Like I used to drink ginger juice a lot because my dad was also huge into juicing. He would juice that with carrots and stuff when I was younger. Something I could definitely use these days. And it's like, yo, hey, it's got a bit of a kick. I typically would have like ginger sauce, like if I'm having like chicken wings or maybe some teriyaki a little bit. But other than that, I don't really have ginger often, but ginger is awesome. I mean, look at us. We're on a sports podcast and we're talking about ginger. That's the best. I mean, ginger
Good stuff, people.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Like, give it a try if you haven't sometime. But one thing that we both don't have to try, unless you are a complete sucker for disappointment and pain, is if you are a Red Sox fan. This Red Sox season so far has been a dud. That's probably putting it very mildly because they're hovering around 500 right now. And part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the pod, Danny, was because I wanted to talk baseball. You know, I've done a lot of Celtics, Bruins, for obvious reasons. But the Red Sox, they've been neglected a little bit. So I thought today would be a good opportunity to talk about the Red Sox. And the first thing I want to touch on is overall thoughts on the 2023 Red Sox so far. What has stood out to you? What has surprised you? And does any of what you've seen or heard of so far as it pertains to the Red Sox surprise you?
I want to answer the first part that you hit on in that
Sure.
the start of the season was rough. And I hate making excuses for anybody because these are professional athletes and there are no excuses. You win and lose. That's it. That's the end of the book.
Oh, yeah.
But the first week at Fenway Park, when they played the Orioles and the Pirates, the wind was howling out to the outfield.
Oh, I remember.
And keep in mind, it's howling out to the outfield for both teams. It's not like one team has an unfair advantage here. But Brian Reynolds hit like 3 home runs or 4 home
Babe
runs.
Ruth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was crushing balls. Orioles, Adley Rutschman, game 1 went, I think it was 5 for 5 on opening day.
Yes.
Offense was Fenway Park turned into Great American Small Park for a week.
Yeah.
So I hate making these excuses, but when you look at the numbers, the Red Sox bullpen in the last week and a half has all of a sudden leveled out. Like the law of averages is coming back together. So with Kenley Jansen manning the end of that back of the bullpen, which is what they really needed, they needed a consistent closer. So then they could set the rest of their bullpen up for bridge guys in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, or going into the 9th inning. So I think it was a little unfair to overreact to what the Red Sox had at the start of the season, just because of all the elements, all the moving pieces. You have a new third baseman, Justin Turner. Kike Hernandez was not expected to be the starting shortstop this year until spring training started. He's struggling defensively. A lot of moving parts, and then to put that together with the atmospheric, element that was happening the first week of the season, I think it's coming back to the law of averages right now. So no need to panic if you're a Red Sox fan. At least that's the way I'm thinking right now. There's some talent. The offense is starting to get going a little bit, and it's going to be a tough division, 1 through 5 in the American League East. That's the toughest part about it.
Absolutely. It's only tougher because the Rays are on a pace that I want to say it's unbelievable, but it's pretty damn historic. I mean, when you're starting the season as well as like as you can remember in recent memory, they are, the last time I checked, they were like 20-3 or something along those lines, like 20-4. You're starting the way that the Red Sox started. Of course, you're going to be on behind the A ball, but I will also add to that. You talk about the division, and we know that this is the division now with the new playoff format. You have 3 wild cards. And I look at this division, obviously the Rays are the kings of the division as of right now. The Blue Jays I think they are definitely going to be contenders. The Yankees are going to be the Yankees. I mentioned on a previous podcast with Casey Stern that I had a funny feeling about Baltimore, but Baltimore pitching is absolutely atrocious. That leaves us with the Red Sox now. Is there a way that the Red Sox could still make the postseason? Is it possible, given what we have seen so far? And obviously, you still got the trade deadline coming up later in the season. But do you foresee a scenario that the Red Sox make the postseason with this format?
If Chris Sale can stay healthy and be the Chris Sale that we all know and love, that's really the X factor for me, because we can talk about your Nick Pavettas, your Corey Klubers. You need an ace in that rotation to be able to pitch 200 innings. And keep in mind, Chris Sale is probably not going to pitch over 200 this year just because of his recent injury history. But if he can, get 25 to 30 starts, be the ace that the Red Sox need. We just talked about the bullpen success that they're having right now. I think they have the offensive elements. When you take into account that the fact that Verdugo's crushing baseballs right now, the fact that you have Justin Turner's hitting the ball well early on, they're going to mix and match and kind of do what Chaim Bloom does best, and that's be a matchup nightmare for platooning, et cetera. So I think the offense is going to be there. The bullpen is showing progress. I think right now the big missing piece is having an ace. And Chris Sale, his first couple starts, didn't look great. And frankly, his entire tenure, at least since the 2019 World Series, with the Red Sox has not been great. So I think if anybody needs, not necessarily a breakout year, he's beyond that, but needs a comeback year, it would be Chris Sale, because that's what the Red Sox need. They need an ace to be able to take the hill every fifth start, because right now, Corey Kluber, when you consider his injury history and his age, maybe not as reliable as you would like. Nick Pivetta, it's kind of a coin flip at times. Chris Sale is what the Red Sox need. They have enough offense. It's really Chris Sale that they need.
Like Chris Sale, and I've said this on record on different platforms, where I feel as if that the contract was a little too premature, and that given the injury history, and that was a concern even when he signed that extension after the 2018 championship season, that are you going to give this amount of money to a player that hasn't been able to give you 200 solid innings, especially since he arrived in Boston? And I mean, we obviously know like the answer to that since then, especially with the injury history and so forth, which brings me to the next point about Garrett Whitlock, because I find him to be a real fascinating point of intrigue. He was dominant as a reliever. The Red Sox have seen him or foresee him as being a legitimate big league starter. Danny, like, where do you see Garrett Whitlock as being the best fit? Do you still believe that he still belongs as part of the bullpen equation that, as you mentioned, has evened out nicely? Or do you believe that he could succeed as a starter and be an important piece for this Red Sox rotation?
I had this conversation a lot with my my co-host on my own podcast with Middlebrooks, who does the pre and post game for for the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
He tends to Bleav that he loves when Whitlock is in the bullpen, similar with guys like Tanner Houck, because that typically means that your starting rotation is so set and so stacked that you can bump very good arms into the bullpen. When you're bumping Whitlock and Houck to the bullpen, that means that you have so much depth in the starting rotation that you're bumping really good talent to the bullpen. That means it's a good problem to have, right? Like it's like having too many good hitters. You don't know where to slot them into the lineup. You're having like kind of similar what the St. Louis Cardinals have. They have so many good hitters in their lineup, they don't even know where to put guys. So I think it just depends on where you're at as a rotation. Right now, with the rotation as is, I think you'd like to see what Whitlock has as a starter. You try and figure out, what kind of stuff works best against certain hitters. Is he better against righties? Is he better against lefties? You kind of fiddle out, go through the weeds, figure out, where he's best. And then put him in the best position to where he can succeed the best for his team down the stretch run. So I know that's not the clear-cut answer I have for you, but I think right now they're trying to figure out who he is and where he fits best.
No, and that's 100% understandable, because even right now, let's say I put up the mirror and I pose that same question to me. I would say I like him in the bullpen. He is dominant. He's that dominant reliever that the Red Sox need in that bullpen that you could also turn to as a reliable source that isn't a Ryan Brazier. And Ryan Brazier, I think he's been a little inconsistent so far this season. And I'm just grateful that the Red Sox went out and they got Kenley Jansen, because that was my number one criticism of the team last year. They didn't have a legitimate closer. You relied on a guy like Matt Barnes, who's no longer with the Red Sox, to be a closer, and the results were poor. Let's be very honest. So when they decided that they were going to put Garrett Whitlock in the rotation, it got me thinking, like, okay, if they are going to do that, how will it impact the rest of the bullpen in terms of who pitches the 6th or the 7th or the 8th innings? And now I look at this Red Sox rotation, and I want to get your thoughts on this. On the Red Sox bullpen, that is. I do question, in front of Kenley Jansen, do you Bleav that the guys have like a set defined role that they can roll with through the regular season, or do you think that this is still some sort of a let's wait and see in progress type of deal?
Let me pull up their depth chart here and let me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't want to answer this with I think they're doing X, Y, Z. I actually want to figure out, because really Middlebrooks is my Red Sox go-to when it comes to expertise here, and so I get a lot of my information from him. But and Will would admit this. Yeah. He tends to be a little biased sometimes, and so he'll he'll be the first to admit it, though. I mean, he's surrounded by these guys on a day-to-day basis, like he's critical of them, which is good. That's his role as pre and post game, as he should be. But it's hard to be objective when you have a personal relationship with guys, and that's for sure.
Absolutely.
So Kenley in the back, you mentioned Brazier. Brazier is definitely struggling. 6.75 ERA through 13 games. So that's not going to get it done. We did talk about the elements the first week and a half of the season at Fenway Park. That probably didn't help him. Cutter Crawford has shown some good stuff. He's kind of like your hybrid guy. Like he can pitch as a starter, can pitch in the bullpen. Brooksy mentions me, Brian. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but Brian Bayo.
Brian Bayo, yeah.
He struggled on the mound as a starter. Brooksy told me this. He said Brian Bayo's stuff is reminiscent of Pedro Martinez, and I said, Brooksy, whoa, like
that's a wild comparison, and we know Pedro is a Hall of Famer.
I said that's hefty. I said we got to slow down here a little bit, and then he told me go look at his film, and so I looked at his minor league film, and he does possess stuff that definitely hasn't gotten the same results, obviously, as Pedro Martinez, but the changeup and the swing and miss changeup that he possesses to go along with that wipeout slider. And in his fastball, as long as he's throwing it in his arm slot that he wants to, because there was a time when Bayo tried going over the top to try and be like a lot of like the other starters with high spin rates. That's not who he is. What he's best at doing is getting movement very similar to like a Logan Webb for the San Francisco Giants, missing barrels. That's what Bayo does well. So if they it kind of goes back to the conversation with Whitlock. if they could get enough depth in their rotation, I'm curious what Brian Bayo would look like in the bullpen as a guy, because he's a guy that can throw up mid to upper 90s with movement, and he's got that changeup to go along with it. That's really if we're going to really open a can of worms here, it's really, can the Red Sox stay healthy? Because the more healthy they are, the more they can slot guys into successful spots. And that doesn't go just for the pitching staff. That's offensively, that's bullpen, that's defensively. That's what the Red Sox do. That's why they had so much success in that magical, was it 2019 season?
2018.
20 even after that, when Chaim Bloom took over.
2021, yeah.
21. Thank you. Yeah. So when Chaim Bloom first took over, that's what they did. Like, they were able to slot guys and platoon guys, but you need to be healthy to be able to do that. That's what the Red Sox have to do. And unfortunately, it's not always in their control.
And the health aspect has been a major factor this season, and the people that I had the opportunity to have the conversation with about the Red Sox. And even as a pure baseball fan, I'm just like, there's a lot of ifs with this team. And I don't know if you could survive a season in terms of being a playoff team with the amount of what ifs the Red Sox have. And what my what ifs prior to the start of the season, and we're almost a full month into the season, but we're not quite there just yet, was health of the rotation. What was the status of Chris Sale going to be? Even as of right now, the Red Sox are still holding their breaths on James Paxton. There's no definitive way of knowing when and if he's even going to return at any given point. But last from what I was reading in The Athletic was that his stuff is still there. He's still got his fastball. That's not the problem. It's just being able to spot his pitches. So, and that's definitely something that leaves me for pause for concern. Even when he does come back, is he another guy? And as you mentioned, if the rotation is healthy and everybody knows their roles, is this another arm that can come out of the Red Sox bullpen? And also, when I think about the 2023 Red Sox so far, there is one aspect that I can't help but think about, and that is specifically Rafael Devers. Rafael Devers was signed to a long-term contract after the Red Sox did not bring back Xander Bogaerts, as he went to sign an 11-year deal with the San Diego Padres. I mean, but Bogaerts right now is killing it in San Diego. And what are your thoughts on Rafael Devers, as now he is the undoubted face of the franchise for the Boston Red Sox? And do you agree with the decision by Chaim Bloom and Red Sox front office not to bring back Xander Bogaerts at the price that he was certainly getting on the open market?
Talked to a lot of people about the Xander Bogaerts situation on both sides, the San Diego side and the Boston side. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, there is no possible way that the Red Sox were going to go that far contract-wise when it came to Bogaerts, because Bogaerts is going to be 41 years old when his contract with San Diego is concluded. So from the Red Sox perspective, they're trying to pay guys for their youth. And that's also, in that same token, that's what they did with Devers. So Devers, when his extension ends with the Red Sox, he's only still going to be 37 years old. Now, to compare that to guys like Aaron Judge, we talked about Xander, Trey Turner, all those guys are going to be creeping up on 40 when their contracts end.
Yeah.
Devers is going to be 37. And so that's typically, as an organization, when you want your contracts to start seeing light at the end of the tunnel type thing, because typically that's when your primes decline. You don't want to get stuck with the Albert Pujols contract that the Angels were handcuffed with for 10 years and ended up releasing him before his contract ended. Similarly with Justin Upton with the Angels. I think the Angels situation scared a lot of organizations into completely investing in low 30s guys for 10 plus years. It scared the Atlanta Braves from going too heavy with Freddie Freeman. Similarly, he signed a similar contract with the Dodgers that the Braves offered him. That maybe that's another conversation for another day, but I think teams were scared to get caught in the same position as the Angels did, especially the high analytical guys like Chaim Bloom. Farhan Zaidi in San Francisco has struck out on free agents in recent years. Aaron Judge, Harper, Bauer, etc. I think teams are scared to be in an Angels position because now the Angels have the longest playoff drought in Major League Baseball. And a lot of that is because of the contracts that have handcuffed them in recent years. So I love the signing of Devers because of the youth that's going to be on his side as that contract continues. And I don't, the problem with the Bogarts thing, in short, is they should have extended him before last season. That was their best opportunity to sign before other teams got involved. That was their opportunity. They missed their opportunity. They let him go to the open market, and they allowed other teams to get involved. That's where that got sour.
And that's a great point, because you mentioned about the Angels in terms of like the contracts that they gave out, the lengthy ones to Albert Pujols, like the 10-year deal, which really became an albatross after year number one. Another player that comes to mind for me in terms of the mistake that the Angels made. Remember when they signed Josh Hamilton? Like shortly after he had his MVP season, I think in 2010 with the Texas Rangers. And I think they signed him after the 2012 season, if memory serves me correctly. But
CJ Wilson is another guy.
CJ Wilson, thank you. Oh gosh, oh my,
it's bad.
You thought that was going to be that was going to put the Angels over the top, and it was going to make them like contenders, and it turned out to be nah. No, not so fast.
And with Ohtani becoming a free agent, now they're kind of like, well, we haven't had a whole lot of success signing. Ohtani's like a legend. Like, I'm not trying to compare.
He's already a legend. Yeah, you can say that
for sure. But I'm not trying to like compare him to your CJ Wilsons and Josh Hamiltons. But they just haven't had good success. Anthony Rendon, his contract is looking atrocious right now. Ooh. So the Angels just have not had success in the free agent. They haven't had success, period, in anything. What I understand, they don't treat their minor leagues as fairly as they should. They're minor leaguers. Apparently the conditions and environment is not great with their minor leaguers. They haven't had success at the big league level. They haven't done it on the free agent market, and they haven't done it in the draft. You got to be able to be good at one of those things, and the Angels haven't done it. So it's no surprise, other than them having the two best players in Major League Baseball, it's really no surprise why the Angels don't have more success than they have.
And you know what's interesting? Like, I want to pivot from Red Sox to Major League Baseball, because a lot of the conversations that I've listened to on a national level, because at the core, even though everybody knows I'm a diehard Yankee fan, but baseball is my heart and soul. And even when we last spoke on the podcast 3 years ago, like, baseball is clearly our thing. The thing that stood out to me was the way that these massive contracts are being handed out, because I can't help but to think back to, let's say, 2011. These 10-year contracts were being handed out like candy. And let's go back to even as recent as 2014-ish or 15. Like, before the offseason, that was really the last time that I noticed that 10-year contracts were being handed out. Say, hey, you know what? Here's a 10-year deal. You've earned it. I'm thinking of the Mike Trout contract with the Angels.
Mm-hmm.
And in that same breath, now we fast forward. I think this is the most critical time for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, because I've talked about this openly, but it is truly one of the greatest tragedies in pro sports that you've wasted Mike Trout's prime years. He's going to be 32, ladies and gentlemen, come July, come August, to be exact. And he's only has had one postseason appearance in 3 games in grand total. Shohei Ohtani, who is the modern day Babe Ruth, has not played a single game in the postseason. And I say all of this because I can't even begin to imagine the pressure that there is got to be on that Angels organization that has not tasted postseason success in 10 years now. You have 2 of the best players of this generation on the same team, and you've had absolutely no success. And I mean, literally no success to that. So, Danny, do you foresee a scenario that if the Angels are out of contention by the All-Star break come July, that Ohtani says, you know what? Trade me. Do you see that happening? Do you see that even being a realm of possibility?
Oh, yeah. I'd say if the Angels are out of contention come trade deadline time, he's as good as gone. Wilson Contreras with the Cubs last year, the Cubs opted not to trade him at the deadline. Now you do, because of the way that their arbitration and the new deal works, you get a supplemental draft pick if you don't trade Ohtani, but you're going to get prospects back. That's worth more than a supplemental draft pick. I thought the Cubs made a huge mistake not trading Wilson Contreras this last year, and then he ended up signing with their arch rival Cardinals.
St. Louis.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he's as good as gone. He wants to win. That's why he came over here. And right now, the Dodgers, who did not spend money this past offseason, which was alarming because when you consider that the Dodgers have had the highest payroll in Major League Baseball each of the past, I think, 4 or 5 years.
Yep. Yes.
And so all of a sudden they decide, nah, we're not going to spend money. And actually, we're going to let Trey Turner go. And actually, Justin Turner, you can go too. And Bellinger, we don't want to pay you either. So they lost 3 key starters. And then you take into account too, Gavin Lux got injured. Walker Buehler was injured. The Dodgers all of a sudden look like, I hate to use this term because they don't do this in LA, but it's almost like a retooling year. If you
want to say rebuild, but you're right, a retooling.
Yeah, like I didn't want to say rebuild just because like that's not what they do, but this is a different situation that the Dodgers are in. All of a sudden they're using much younger guys like Miguel Vargas in there. They're having to. They're putting
Julio Urias is another example who's the young ace of that pitching staff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So they're just in a different spot this year, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if the one year we don't think the Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series, they all of a sudden hoist. That's just the way baseball works.
Yeah.
But the Dodgers are in prime position to go after Ohtani in the sweepstakes. Steve Cohen is going to be giving Shohei Ohtani a blank check.
God.
San Francisco Giants are going to be involved. I mentioned how the Giants have missed out on Judge and Cole and all these other Correa. They're going to be handing Ohtani a blank check. There's going to be a long line at Ohtani's front door, and it's just going to be a matter of who is willing to spend upwards of $500 million, maybe even close to $600 million for Ohtani. And to answer your question, again, if the Angels are not in contention at the deadline, all indications are he is as good as gone.
I completely forgot about Steve Cohen and the Mets, and that's why I reacted the way I did. It was like, oh, shit. Damn, that man who is richer than fucking Bill Gates. Like, I totally forgot, like, oh, yeah, he's there like, hi. So how can I help you? And his wife is like, listen, I want Shohei Ohtani. Give him a blank check. Take him to, I'm from New York, born and raised. Take him to the most expensive Japanese restaurant in the city. Maybe Betty Hana's or something. I don't know. And just strike a deal. That terrifies me because it's like, there's no one else that's going to spend the money the way that Steve Cohen will. And it has already proven that in 2 short years already as owner, which is astounding when you begin to think about where the New York Mets once were under the coupons, aka the Wilpons, and now with Steve Cohen. Now, as I really begin to deliver the question and the point, I look at this Mets team and I say to myself, it's early and I know there's only 25 games that's been played so far. But I look at Max Scherzer with an eye of concern. And the reason is because, and I'm sure you know this, he got suspended for 10 games after he initially was checked and was warned allegedly about the sticky stuff with the rosin and washing his hands with the rubbing alcohol or whatever that was. And yet he still chooses to do it again. And yet you are depending on him to deliver the goods. All the while Justin Verlander is trying to work his way back from injury. This is a New York Mets team overall that has championship aspirations. So Danny, is it fair to say that Max Scherzer has not gotten off to an ideal start with the New York Mets, or am I just completely just overblowing this whole thing?
No, that's absolutely fair. I don't think it's all on Max. Here, I kind of compare the Mets and their strategy into making into the postseason to the Los Angeles Clippers and their what is it called? Not game management.
Load management.
Load management.
That's
Thank
an
you.
interesting. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So they're basically, when they had DeGrom and they had Scherzer, those are two guys. Scherzer's older, and then DeGrom has the injury history. So they tried to kind of like welcome them back into the fold, both those guys, in time for the postseason. But come postseason time, Scherzer was also dealing with some injury stuff, and he wasn't at his best. And then DeGrom wasn't quite himself either toward the last stretch of the year. And then similarly, this year, they opted to put Justin Verlander on the injured list to start the year.
Yeah.
And Scherzer has struggled a little bit. And basically what the Mets are doing, similar to the Clippers, is they're saying, look, we don't really care about how many wins we get in the regular season. We just want our guys ready for the postseason. And that's a great idea, in a perfect world. But if something goes wrong, such as with Kawhi Leonard now all of a sudden with a knee injury, that whole load management idea, or that whole, well, don't worry about the regular season, we just got to get into the dance. If something goes wrong, then all that's for naught. And so
that's not going to fly in New York at all.
No, not when you're making $40 million a year, which is what Max Scherzer is making. That guy's making $1.2 million per start. Now he's missing 10 games. Fortunately, the Mets don't. Yeah, and they don't have to. I don't think they have to pay him during the suspension, or else they would have lost $2 million for 2 starts there. So maybe the Mets actually lucked out on that monetary. Not that Steve Cohen cares about money. That's
exactly.
It's not the start that the Mets want, and I don't think they care. But maybe they should. You know what I mean? Like maybe they should look at the Clippers and be like, we don't want to do the whole load management thing. Let's play out the games and see what happens. So I'm not hitting the panic button on the Mets, but they're not where everyone wants them to be. I think that's fair to say.
I would agree with that. And in a season where that we have seen a lot transpire already across Major League Baseball, but none more bigger, in my opinion, than the change in changing like the time of game. And I thought that this topic would be the most befitting to end the podcast, which is we have a few minutes left. There was a lot that was made during spring training as to, well, would the pitch clock really work? And you saw the results almost instantly. It was a borderline on absolute defying of belief, just how faster the games were going. I myself was cynical at first. I was like, I'm not sure this is really going to be a long-term answer to what has been a long-withstanding problem with Major League Baseball, but I could not have been more wrong. It has worked and then some. And not only that it has worked, but you're seeing games ending 2 hours and 15 minutes. An instance already where there was a Red Sox game that ended in 1 hour and 57 minutes. And I'm like, in what universe? This is perfect. I can get in and get out.
Hell yeah.
So Danny, I just want to get your full thoughts on the changes in baseball from the pitch clock to now the larger bases that you're seeing guys take full advantage of that. What are your thoughts on the changes so far in 2023?
I'm surprised at how seamless the transition has been. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that the first month was going to come with heavy kinks. And we've seen kinks like we saw in San Diego. Machado got ejected because he asked for timeout at the 8-second mark. Home plate umpire opted not to grant that timeout, and Machado was given the automatic strike. Machado was upset. Machado got ejected. We've seen some kinks. We've had something like Pete Alonso. I believe this was in spring training. He was taken off on a foul ball, and he was slow getting back to first base. They actually gave the hitter an automatic strike because Alonso, who was on first base, didn't get back to his first base in time. So we're seeing things that maybe no one really predicted, and you can't predict everything in baseball, which makes this game so beautiful, right? But I think The players have transitioned seamlessly for the most part. There's certainly been some examples, but overall, it's been pretty smooth. Nobody in Major League Baseball, Fangraphs, is actually keeping track of how many violations there have been. There hasn't been a player in baseball that has more than 3 violations this year.
Wow.
So there's not like one player that's just really struggling, can't figure out, can't get this new tempo. Pretty much 100% of the players are figuring it out. We can't talk about guys like Juan Soto, who struggled early on, and he said he doesn't like the pitch clock. He can't play the mind games that he usually likes to have. But at this point, according to the ratings, according to the attendance, everything's up. So if a player decides like, I just don't like these new rules, I don't know what I got to do, you better figure it out, because everything is pointing in the right direction. You know what I mean? Like, adapt or die, so this is going to stay. Fans like it. Most of the players seem to be good with it too. I think 95% of the players are happy that they don't have to work 3 hours anymore. They only have to work 2.5. So it's been a great transition. Fans seem to really enjoy it, and I think it's great for the game of baseball.
Last question. Now, we talked about the pitch clock. I want to get your thoughts on what you've seen from Max Muncy of the Dodgers. He suddenly looked like an early season Barry Bonds out in Los Angeles.
He's leading the league in homers, and the funny thing about Muncy is he has this reputation of not swinging at many pitches. That's just what he does. Well, the cool thing is he's leading baseball in homers, but he's also swinging at fewer pitches than anybody. So he has, you talk about his rate per swing.
Yeah.
It's like not even close, head and shoulders above the next guy. He has 11 homers this year, leads the majors. He has a swing rate of around 40%, which is second lowest in baseball behind only Rowdy Tellez of the Brewers. So he's making the most of his swings. That's a simple way to put it. He needed a bounce back season after the struggle that he had last year with the Dodgers. The Dodgers, with like those guys that we already mentioned, leaving in free agency, they needed a Max Muncy comeback season. So that's exactly what he's showing.
It's been an absolute blast. Danny Vietti of CBS Sports, and as well as the Wake and Rake podcast on Bleav. Danny, it's been a blast, seriously. And thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast to talk baseball, which we haven't done in a while. It won't be another 3 years, that's for sure. This is the beginning of the season, but there will be a lot more to come. Danny, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shukri. Next time we talk, I'm gonna have a full gray beard, like down to the chest. I can promise you that.
Yes, I bring it on.